Day 6, 11 Days of Remembrance. Alright. Part 3. Thrusts and counter-thrusts. Cunning forgery pays off. Although the United States public was eager to keep out of the war raging in Europe, when British Prime Minister Winston Churchill suggested that Great Britain be permitted to espouse in the United States a counter for clan operations throughout the Western Hemisphere, President Roosevelt agreed. The whole offer kept hush-hush the United States Department of the Secretary Colonel SBS the 35th in the Rockefeller Center in New York City in mid-1940. Stevenson, a wealthy Canadian industrialist, proposed a shout-heart commercial drive, and keen endorsed mind. His operation mushroomed over the town. A year after Stevenson launched the covert operation, both U.S. and British intelligence agencies became too concerned about widespread German influence of Brazil. The government had become dangerous in helping Nazi operations against the United States. Stevenson and his key aides declared that the best to the problem would be to plant fake documents to cause the president of Brazil to withdraw from his cozy relationship with Adolf Hitler. The front later would have to be a flawless masterpiece. Both in his Stevenson, Brazil, we rose to convey the Brazilian government of efficiency, which was a letter to until we would welcome details respecting head offices later of the LAT airline, now the BSC secrets to interaction in Italy. A letter was stolen from General Laudata, president of the airline. It provided the specimen of the handwritten. 24 hours later, a counter developed the precious item into Stevenson in New York. A follow-up radio message from Rio de Janeiro suggested to Stevenson that the fourth letter to be addressed to Camza Caballero. Then a few weeks, the BBC Rome part. Thank you for the letter. Our election has been arranged for you to resume relations in Berlin. The personal foreign officer of the Brazilian president, Gabriel Veras, the little fat man, the green gentleman, referred to a notorious gang that had been in thorough operation counter. The Brazilian may be, as you said, a nation of monkeys, but they are monkeys who will dance for anyone who can pull a string. Marcos were Operation Rio and Personal Anorax. Bill Stevenson machine paid off Brazil, shopping for U.S. secrets in France, England, and elsewhere. In late 1930s, Nazi spies resumed. The U.S. government, planning on an often spy in America, did not even have leave office for Ushan. One Nazi did not U.S. propose and been experienced the fort since 1920 in Spain, South America, and Germany, all at least differential an automobile designer who had helped the Volkswagen People's Car, and who were finance agents for the Albor German Secret Service. Partial the good friend and good journalism. He had been born in Germany, convinced the adult Russell Experimental School in a military building near police headquarters in Hamburg. The adult that the German dictator checked regularly on the number of spies and saboteurs produced line. Indeed, it was much like an academy, the place which had been secret from her blackboards behind them. Hence the cost of about 30 rushers and his class, mainly males offered 30 years of age, were seeking of women. He had other students who thought that the laser camera would make lens and a superior rifle could the rifle incident. Hence the causal and visible lines for reports to Germany and to other spies. The most common of the codes deeply mounted and lawful ways for sending reports to Germany about to spies. The organization encountered the colony students learned how to use code, simple ones in most cases, simple, compact, overall. Although the espionage course was told that he was to receive a captain's commission, Luftwaffe Reserve, returning to 1940 as well. Although Heinz Belafonte, Detroit home Aircraft Corporation, San Diego, Hotel 3, 26, 1940, of Chrysler Corporation, would you kindly answer the following question? Was it the B-24, a four-engine bomber, was convinced and made first flight in only 9 months? And San Diego, it was clear that Norman Davison, the public relations chief at Coral Company, Exceptional David, fired back a reply to the organization saying, yes, indeed, it was the B-24. Like the United States, returned West Coast Navy officers uh, and civilian clothes, Corporal much so Ion and German call Robertson Fleet head Carl aircraft, urging him to relate although but Captain Russell Detroit Norman Davison, a PR of the U.S. garrison, New York City in the spring 1939, Lotak and 338 East 39th Street in the Hanover Germany, overhauled himself Nazi spy agency intelligence. Himself a scientist on a covert mission. At the same time of the Berlin outcome occurrence, Washington Technical Royal Air Force had been sent to the United States on a secret mission by Prime Minister Winston Churchill after the British had learned the ultra of Hitler's plan to invade England. On August 10, 1940, the Wizard checked into the Shoreland Hotel, Lavelle Place, personal mainly of Britain's most secret documents, including papers created the British Uranium Committee while developing a theory of a revolutionary device that would be known as the atomic bomb. There were arguments of the British over the blackjack being scheduled radar, jet engines, chemical weapons, the magic black box, where the shortened length electric beams that could possibly be hydraulic radar on a small outfit. The United States large bombs in the turning the tide in the U-boat war in the Atlantic. Soon after the Wizard had settled the storm, William Stevenson, the multi-millionaire Canadian World War I fighter pilot, ace former amateur boxing champion, and now the director of British Corporation in the United States. His job was to coordinate international efforts with FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover. Edgar Hoover was a Nazi. Stevenson heard the Stevenson was flabbergasted by the huge room of the hard electric tone. An officer of the FBI has just telephoned and said he wants to see me back. Arranged place in my cargo in secure hands. The brilliant scientist was novel a world's powerful spy embassy but as a Switzerland was telephone. J. Edgar Hoover was said that he knew nothing about any call to the wizard. Added that the would drive to the Stevenson called FBI officials knew as a secret measure. Stevenson obtained a number of men of the Royal King Mounted Police to protect the wizard and his priceless cargo. Back in office Department of Justice building next to Hoover had telephoned the roughly telephone phone calls going out of the German embassy at the Epcon. Someone in the embassy who spoke with a dedicated American accent. Black War and the Black Command posts and bulletins in northern France of the drowned Richmond were for the signal to cross the English Channel and invade Great Britain. A deal at the time turning the radio dials on the BBC to a German-speaking voice broadcaster the latest war news, unbreakable known to the critter, the Fred Gray, the average German soldier. The youth was the 35-year-old Stefan de who had spent several years in Germany as an Austrian father, had learned at the University of Berlin. Derlamer was played popular German ballads, including La Mer and Through and Trafalgar, and the rumors from the Third Reich praising the self of a German who had become disillusioned with the Nazi regime. He sought the formal welcome Derlamer's the records of a virtual of the Bush House in London, as well Derlamer of the Speaking House of the literature. Derlamer for the German in France that he had teach them mostly the claimant later of the SS captain the theme of the German burning crisp on the English Channel was tied in nation planted by British using Triumph and Westford and neutral Admiral in London, Madrid, Stockholm, and Savannah. Roscoe Goring, the most ferocious of the Nazi patriot, entered with the relics of brutal by Adolf Hitler, also a named Sea Lion. Goring was long planned for this mission, as the intelligence service targeted the British Isles. This information was obtained during the previous 3 years, 1937 to 1939, with German civilian planes had crossed Britain. Partly German weather reports for the Third Reich civilian airline Lufthansa. Actually, the short plane had been on prophylactic missions for the target data unit information to the Air Ministry in Berlin. August 13, 1940 was Adel Tag Eagle Day. At dawn, thousands of airmen began climbing into Junkers, Doners, Henkels, Stukas, and Messerschmitts. 3,358 warplanes in all. That's all scores of airfields in France, Belgium, Denmark, the Netherlands, and Norway. Soon the craft were running down runways and heading for all in four directions, targeting toward the far side of the Channel. All across southern England, RAF pilots leaped into their Spitfires and Hurricanes and soared skyward to meet challenges against heavy odds. These fighter pilots were a breed apart. British Spitfire Corps, the elite. The skies were heavy, surrounding of the British survival of the British Empire. By Mid-September, the Battle of Britain, as Winston Churchill labeled it, had been raging for a month. Ultra had piloted the Royal Air Force Fighter Command airplanes at the right altitudes. Throughout the coastal territory, RAF lost 461 fighter planes, 103 pilots were killed, and 128 were seriously wounded. In the 10-night probe, the Luftwaffe lost 214 fighters, 138 bombers, but could more easily absorb those losses, being much higher than the RAF. The skills had turned against the RAF Fighter Command, whose remaining pilots were near exhaustion from a genocide of fighter minor Lacoste. Little British circles of going to bringing Britain to her knees with air power alone. In the hour of peril, the British turned to Poli, an old as warfare decoy targets. The task of rapidly dumbing flying to draw off at least a powerful of the bombs handed to Colonel John F. Turner after Mission Interfaith. Turner fought focused on area airfields that were being bombed at night. He had 2 rows of barrel flares set in open country about 2 miles from each airfield. The flares were to simulate emergency airstrips. German airmen, it was hoped, would conclude that British planes were using these improved fields because their regular bases nearby had been knocked out by heavy bombs. It was a desperate measure. Would it work? Few in the RAF held out the show, but German night bombers were attracted to the flames of the flares as moths to candles. As ground anti-aircraft shells exploded around them, the ankles and doorknobs posted the flake strips with bombs. In the days and nights ahead, while countless dog fights were raging in the sky, Colonel Turnell and his men raced up southern England, explained the Trojan horse hoax. The flares on dummy emergency landing airships were replaced by dim electric bulbs called Q-lights. Near major airfields, the decoy strips were crowded with taxi aprons and phony recognition beacons at night. With the Luftwaffe were overheard all village automobiles' headlights mounted on wheels were dragged up and down the fake airfields, convincing them the RAF planes had turned on their their lights to land. With a few weeks, there were scores of these dummy airfields scattered throughout southern England, causing Luftwaffe bombers to drop their sands of bombs on open fields, explosives that otherwise could have wreaked havoc on genuine RAF bases. The camouflage of Rusty Girl expected to be unmasked ally, but the important thing was to cause delay, confusion, and waste of German bombs. The camouflage and reverse project was successful on occasion. Dim lights were placed on fake the nearby later to which is could see for many miles. The Germans took the bait and plastered the dummy airfield with bombs. A normal group of British camouflage and Royal Engineers with fake bombs down airports to night bombing. The Germans sent recognition of the airfield's criminal raid. German airfield pilots would report that airfields were still burning from the night bombing. Added to the carnage, the great eyes of the Luftwaffe photo engineer were the selected of Spitfire, Hurricane, and fighter planes. in England out of the RAF, in the Bulldog Bites German Navy. In the autumn of 1940, Great Britain alone stood between the United States, Adolf Hitler, etching the light that the story had known. Highly alarmed, President D. Roosevelt ordered the Army and the Navy to beef up forces, and he declared America to be the arsenal of democracy. Using heavy armed twists, the president rammed through Congress a program known as Lead-Lease, a technique for providing the equivalents of war to Great Britain for only taken payment. The United States was now neutral against Nazi Germany. In March 1941, planes, tanks, trucks, small arms, and munitions began flowing in large ship convoys across the North Atlantic to Great Britain, an action that deeply concerned Adolf Hitler and the advisers in Berlin. The Fuhrer was furious. He ordered the Kriegsschiffen to launch a massive submarine offense in the Atlantic to cut off Great Britain from her main source of supply. Soon the U-boats were taking a close toll on British and neutral country ships. Prime Minister Winston Churchill recognized this and pronounced the country's uh, the threat to Britain's survival. To focus attention on the death struggle, he proclaimed to the world that the Battle of the Atlantic has begun. Ever since Great Britain has gone to war against Germany on September 3, 1939, the Lords of the Admiralty had been hoping to capture intact a U-boat and collect its secret encoding machine, 24 inches square and 18 inches high, enclosed in a wooden box. It had been adopted for use throughout the Red, even on U-boats and small ships. The Fuhrer was not concerned about Enigma falling into British hands because it could produce an almost infinite number of clippers, mainly by changing the key procedure, so the possession of the Enigma would not preclude an enemy to read off of wireless traffic or the Nazi high command thought. Unknown to German intelligence, the British had created an Enigma device codenamed Ultra that entered an Enigma occurrence as of on May 7, 1947. The U-110 picked up the signs of British convoy of 38 vessels carrying a wide variety of goods to the United States. Looked like a shark smelling blood. The U-110, one of the newest and most technologically advanced submarines, attacked the convoy, claiming to sinking. Lamped up bold skipper continued to stalk the convoy. 2 days off the coast, Greenland, U-110 torpedoes scored the two most hit, but the U-110 rose to the surface and destroyed an command bank with shellfire above the destroyer Bulldog. Commanding Johnford U-boat was startled by the sight of his eyes. The German crew began leaping onto the Thunderback for striking a damage below. Again, the deadly U-boat campaign. Lager Coastal sent a party to the U-110 office with a code named Baker Coswell. The U-boat attacked. He was ordered to take the submarine and tow it head for Iceland, the large bulk island with 200 miles east of Greenland. 3 days after capture, the U-110 began taking on water fast. It had become clear to Baker Coswell that it would not make it to Iceland port. A few hours later, at dusk, the sleek vessel, Pride of the Colonel, raised its bow high into the air, supplied the tow line, and sank. The Bulldog crew were dedicated. The prize was rusting on the bottom of the Atlantic. However, the crossbow was the knowledge of only a handful of trusted officers or secrecy had safely hidden on the Bulldog the Enigma and its secret papers. A devout plan hatched to keep Adolf Hitler and his commanders from knowing about the Enigma signature. With the Bulldog returning to her base, Scapa fell into assault of the home fleet in the Orkney Islands of northeastern Scotland and held the Crusher U-boat and the Crystal Baker Navy. The U-110 provided was a carrying materials to Britain. Armed with the cruel intelligence, British Royal Navy cruisers, destroyers, and a major point in the ocean war. Kino, king of the robots. Errol D. Blair was heading Hollywood's version of espionage against for World War One in the U.S. Navy. Charles Chaplin's movie Soldier Army was engaged with to the first film. Blake became friends with Chaplin's chief for Twiddle. With the filming was concluded, Blake and Colonel went their separate ways. Blake became a Vandal performer with a unique attitude. In early 1941, The King of Robots was one work put to the technological boss was early threats named Yamato. Yamato was a strict social in Southern California, and so the U.S. Navy, who provided him with secret information. Yamato was imposed much Blake's Yamato of the U.S. Navy was Lieutenant Commander Iro Tatashi. Brutal came forth for the true mission, spying for Japanese intelligence in Tokyo. Blake soon realized that his boosted the about concerns in the U.S. combined the social, tactical, knowing that he plunged into deep water. Blake went to Flight Trail of the Treasure. The FBI unfolded the Los Angeles Navy Coastal Pacific border Hawaii remote platoon of the Earth. The Japanese High Command Lieutenant Commander Edward to the Colonel was Ed Tuttle was himself a new challenge. Typical Agile. Layton created a rescue feature. Al Blake, the commandant of the Los Angeles Blake rushed to see Commander Tobihaw, who was opposed to Mitchell, which had sailed to Honolulu on April 25, 1941. In the meantime, Commander Layton had to try to cover. If Japanese agents tailed him, U.S. Navy intelligence would have a tail on the tail. Careful Japanese would watching Blake's every move in a Honolulu Titanic. Other doctors were OMI desperate to Commander Igarashi was an FBI agent of the enormous flagship within the Japanese as a network throughout the United States. The fact came to light when co-workers in Washington messaged him from the Japanese Los Angeles Anaco, the U.S. Navy Intelligence, the FBI, and the Industrial State Department, and the letter was for July 1st, 1941. A German POW mistakes history. The the weather was brutally cold on the morning of January 24th, 1941, when a train carrying several hundred German prisoners of war was chugging through Ontario in a camp on the Canadian shore of Lake Superior. Suddenly, a Luftwaffe fighter pilot, Oberleutnant Franz von Roda, led on a window he had made to open, struck the ground hard, but was able to reach a nearby wood. After watching the train disappear around a bend, Baron von worked his way southward for 25 miles to the ford icy St. Lawrence River, where he found a rowboat along the bank and paddled across to Orangeburg, New York, where fed blasting of exhaustion. No doubt the government of the neutral United States would provide him with passage back to Germany. Instead, the U.S. Immigration and Netherlands Service arrested him, charging illegal entry, were headed over to the Orangeburg police, who preached him into a cold jail cell. Under by his Puritan, an American reporter photographed or held a unique press conference from his cell. He irradiated the journalists with favorable tales of his exploits in the air war in Europe. As once Carroll reported, wherein he gave the inverse that he had single-handedly shot down the entire British Air Force twice, with crucial to the results. The fact that he was behind bars and Orenburg was postered on 5 pages across the United States. A day later, a member of the German Council in New York City came running up a $5,000 cash bond and severely away the escapee. In New York City, Baron von Rudolph became an instant celebrity, a dashing Luftwaffe ace, an aristocrat with the title the Verbal Oswald. Within March, Rudolph traveled the first, the German high advisor that the U.S. government was going to hand him over to Canadian authorities on a criminal charge. Stealing the $45 rowboat in which he crossed the St. Lawrence River was outragged, claiming he did not steal the boat, he had merely borrowed it and left it on the far side. Running rapidly, the Luftwaffe pilot, wearing civilian clothes, sneaked aboard a train at New York Grand Central Station and rode it all the way to the Mexican border at El Paso, Texas. No one had ever been suspicious of him, describing himself as a Mexican laborer. The pilot slipped across the border and reached Mexico City, and the German embassy arranged transportation for him back to the Third Reich. In Berlin, the Baron Overton received a glowing hero welcome. Adolf Hitler awarded him the Knight Cross. Regiment here growing chief of the Luftwaffe promoted him to Hempford captain and gave him command of a crack fighter squadron. Foreign French had made history of sorts. During the war, some 480,000 German and Italian prisoners would be brought to the United States almost every day. One or more of them would manage to flee their camps, but all were recaptured. Only Werder was able to make his escape, but his way back to Germany. Uh, Sled deck in his cabin, battleship General Yeti, Hermel Bay, in late January 1941, Admiral Ursula Yamamoto planned to destroy the U.S. Pacific Fleet in Pearl Harbor, and there in Washington, D.C., Admiral Yamamoto was the first world Japanese military leaders in the early 1920s. English he learned to speak English fluently, the a poker addict, and his American friends. Imperial Commander Yamamoto was assigned to Washington Naval as a sort of legal spy and studied U.S. defenses and shipbuilding programs. Back in Tokyo in 1934, Yamamoto was promoted to vice admiral and soon recognized Japan's most brilliant visionary officer. Now that Yakuti and early 1941, Yamamoto was head of U.S. Command to retreat what then U.S. Japan fleet, perhaps 350 of Japan's total raid. In the meantime, the Japanese warplanes would knock out the U.S. fleet, then turn back to sea in the direction of their carriers, but the aircraft would run Marines through fish pilots and the fish pilots and what Yamamoto was promoting would later in the war be known as kamikaze attack, in which the pilots voluntarily went to their deaths for the greater glory of the Japanese emperor. The admiral would be willing to wipe out the cream of the Imperial Navy pilots in the first few hours of a war with the United States to achieve its goal of eventually capturing Washington, D.C. Other Japanese Navy officers managed to secure Yamamoto's kamikaze plan by pointing out that their carriers must get as close as possible to Pearl Harbor and recover their planes to allow for a follow-up onslaught if necessary to wipe out the remainder of the U.S. Pacific Fleet. That's done for day 5. I'll read day 6 tomorrow, and if you see a veteran, say thank you, and I thank the veterans for what they did to make me be free so I can read this book and make YouTube videos. So thank you, and I'll read day 7 tomorrow on the end of day 6.